Ellen White was not a superwoman, although her schedule and achievements would seem to indicate that she was. Imagine anyone cruising the United States 24 times by 1885, only 18 years after the Union Pacific and Central Pacific Railroads joined up near Ogden, Utah in 1867. Then remember that this traveling church leader was speaking to groups large and small wherever she went, and writing. When she died, she left behind about 100,000 pages of published and unpublished materials, all once handwritten. She is thought to be the third most translated author in the history of literature. Its most translated woman writer and the most translated American author in other six. But those who knew her saw more than a 5 foot 2 inch public speaker and prodigious writer, tireless in her lifelong dedication to noble causes. As we have already noted, she was an active homemaker, staunchly loyal wife, and warm, affectionate mother. How could all this be when, at age 9, physicians gave her only months to live after the complications that followed her fateful blow in the face? Some have suggested that her trauma early in life damaged the temporal lobe of her brain. This blow, they speculate, caused her to have a type of epilepsy known as complex partial seizures. In turn, they allege that Ellen White's visions were due to temporal lobe epilepsy, not divine revelation. In response to the charge that she had temporal lobe epilepsy, 8 professors in the Loma Linda University School of Medicine and Nursing, including 3 neurologists plus a psychiatrist in Northern California, studied the evidence available. In 1984, they wrote their report entitled "Did Ellen White Have Complex Partial Seizures?" The report states the diagnosis of complex partial seizures disorder temporal lobe or psychomotor epilepsy is often difficult even with the help of modern techniques such as electroencephalography and video recording. The establishment of such a diagnosis retrospectively in a person who died almost 70 years ago and concerning whom no medical records exist can only be at best speculative, tenuous, and controversial. The recent articles and presentations would suggest that Ellen White's visions and writing were the results of a complex partial seizure disorder contain many inaccuracies, ambiguous reasoning, and misapplication of facts have resulting in misleading conclusion. This committee was appointed to evaluate the hypothesis that Ellen G. White had complex partial seizures after a careful review of the autobiographical and biographical material available. Considered in the light of the present knowledge of this type of seizure, it is our opinion that there is no convincing evidence that Ellen G. White suffered from any types of epilepsy. There is no possibility that complex partial seizures could account for Mrs. White's visions of her role in the development of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. Donald Peterson, professor of neurology at Loma Linda University School of Medicine and chief of neurology at Riverside General Hospital, California, gave a more extended response. In visions of seizures, was Ellen G. White the victim of epilepsy? He reviewed certain allegations that Ellen Harmon sustained severe brain damage, that her visions were characteristic of complex partial seizures, that her physical features during visions were characteristic of complex partial seizure disorder automatisms, no form of mental incompetence. After examining the technical aspects of the allegations in the light of the latest medical knowledge, Dr. Peterson forthrightly denied any correlation between Ellen White's condition during visions of her prolific writing capacity. with any indication of any kind that would suggest brain damage and resulting complex partial seizure disorder. He concluded a careful examination of these theories in the light of the historical record shows that they have failed to establish that Ellen White's sickness consists of serious temporal lobe injury and the phenomena associated with her visions were consistent with partial seizure disorder. It is the conviction of this researcher that it was a manifestation of the true prophetic gift, not some form of epilepsy. After the accident at 9 years of age, she was plagued with headaches, eye inflammation, and respiratory weakness. Tuberculosis drained her, and physicians offered no hope, only an early death. Dropsy, a heart condition, affected her for most of her life. When she received her vision in December 1844, she had to be transformed in a wheelchair to Elizabeth Haynes' home. She could not talk about a whisper. When she was invited to share her December vision at Poland, Maine, in late January 1845, she had no voice. However, when she began to speak, all the promises that God had given her regarding His abiding strength were fulfilled. She spoke with a clear, audible voice for nearly 2 years without fatigue. This experience of restored strength in the pulpit before the eyes of those who saw the amazing transformation from weaknesses to power was repeated many times in her long ministry. In early summer 1845, a physical weak and young Ellen had a remarkable vision. Up to this time, I could not write. Rheumatism in both ankles. 2 years later, Ellen White slipped on ice, badly wrenching her ankle, and had to struggle with crutches for 6 weeks. Rheumatism eventually affected both ankles and bothered her severely till her death. When 3 months pregnant in March 1860, she with James was heading west to Iowa. James report in the review. March 6 was graphic. We left Battle Creek at 3 p.m., changed cars at midnight at Chicago, reached the Mississippi River at 7 a.m., crossed the ice on foot, walking behind the baggage, drawn and sleigh by 4 men, the ice being too weak to bear up horses, and felt relief when he stepped upon low Iowa soil. The first night in Iowa, Ellen White became very ill, vomiting and raising blood. On she went through the mad of springtime in Iowa, speaking often in the meetings of my body that was free from pain. My hips and my spine were in constant pain. I could not lie on my calf for more than 2 hours at a time. So I had rubber cushions under me. I would drag myself to a similar bed to change my position. Thus the nights passed. Physicians said I would never be able to walk again, and I had fear that my life was to be a perpetual conflict with suffering. One thing is certain, Ellen White never used the fact that she suffered many physical afflictions as a means of gaining the pity of others. To the contrary, when others saw her cherished spirit and determined resolve under intense physical adversities, they looked courage. Her life of literary production and personal ministry, plus her extensive public travel strongly argues for an awareness of how the human will can triumph over physical hardships in the pursuit of God's plan for one's life. In 1915, reaching the age of 87 was not common. Her last known writing, a letter, June 14, 1914, overflowed with hope and Christian joy. The cause of her death, as recorded in both her death certificate and the cemetery sexton's records, was chronic myocarditis contributory asthenia resulting from intracapsular fracture of the left femur. February 30, 1915, secondary contributory arteriosclerosis.